Welcome to the New Intellectuals. My name is Jordan Camp. I'm really thrilled to be here with Jodi Dean, a political theorist, author of the new book, Comrade, an essay on political belonging, which is just out from Verso. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Jodi.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
It's a pleasure. So this book offers a theory of the comrade, and you distinguish comrade from other modes of political address, brother, sister, friend, but also other modes of political belonging. I wonder if you could talk about the theory and the intervention that you're making.
Yeah, so first thing I want to say, one of the kind of exciting and sort of weird things that I found when I was looking at the word comrade is that there has been no systematic treatment of the comrade as a form of political relation at all, right? In the history of political ideas, no one's written a general understanding of what comradeship is and who it is to be, who are comrades, what it is to be a comrade. So I was excited to undertake this project. And then once I started realizing, okay, what's necessary is to recognize how the relation between comrades differs from other kinds. So a comrade is not the same thing as a brother or a sister, right? Those ideas rely on a familial imaginary. Even when you call someone brother, maybe the family imagined is like a kind of religious family or the humanist family of man, but you're automatically gender somebody if you say brother or if you say sister. And you're asserting a kind of kinship, but comradeship's not about being kin, right? And once we start recognizing stuff like, big family gatherings, we know we don't agree with everybody at the table politically, right? There's a difference between someone being my uncle and someone being my comrade. I can really loathe my uncle's politics, but with a comrade, we share a politics. So comrades are not the same as people who are related, who are kin. And then comrades not the same as friends, right? With friends, the philosopher Aristotle is really interested on friendship, where friendship requires a kind of devotion to the excellence and virtue of another person, right? And Aristotle says you can only have a few friends because you can't really devote yourself to the excellence and virtue of a whole bunch of people. There's something really kind of demanding and responsible about the intimacy that friends have. Comradeship, though, is not about making another person great. Comradeship's about being on the same side of a political struggle. So you're oriented towards something outside both of you, right? And your relation is kind of instrumental, right? I'm not trying to make you better for your own sake. I'm trying to sharpen your skills because we need it for the fight. We need it for the struggle. So comrades aren't the same thing as friends. And actually, I think it's crucial for those of us in left groups to recognize this, because sometimes other people won't come join us because they think we're really cliquey and only a bunch of friends, rather than that we are people on the same side of a political struggle, fighting for something. Oh. And so once we recognize it's not, even though we might be friends, that's a really different kind of relation, I think it lets us open our groups up more. So comrades aren't the same thing as neighbors. That's just the neighbor's loud and bangs on the wall. That you live near someone doesn't tell you anything about your political relation to them. It's just not political. Though sometimes people write as if, everybody who is rural or everybody who is urban or all of that state or region somehow share a politics. But that's just false, right? Being in the same location doesn't mean your politics are the same. And so comradeship, same political side, not the same thing as, occupying the same territory. And then I guess, and then the last one would be citizenship. Comrades are not the same as citizens, right? The citizenship relation is mediated by the state, right? Where the state determines who is in it. And with comradeship, that kind of cuts through the state, because as comrades, we may be against the state. We might want to overthrow the state. And the state actually tends to be super skeptical of people who are in comrade relations with each other, rightly recognizing that our relation to other comrades is going to supersede our relation to people we share citizenship with.
And so you look and you explore the theory of the comrade and of comradeship through a range of examples. But some of the most interesting come from the CPUSA. And, figures like Carrie Haywood, Claudia Jones. What lessons does their vision of comradeship offer?
It's so wonderful. So I choose the CPSA examples in part because I have a better understanding of the milieu and the culture, and I can read the language and speak the language, and so that makes it easy. And it's also I wanted to have comrade relations from a relatively small party, right? A party that had not yet taken a state, and that was not having to deal with the challenges of governing, right? So I felt like those examples would give us, examples of people in struggle and people in a party milieu where they're trying to make something happen, not those who are facing the struggles that have already happened. And so I think they're still speak to us, and they're still relevant to us today. So the kind of things that are so exciting about them is the way that CPSA is dealing with race and class divisions, right? I mean, U.S. an intensely racist society, and how are you going to deal with that as you're building a communist movement? And it means that you have to fight against white supremacy from the get-go, right? You can't go anywhere if there is white supremacy in your movement. You cannot get any kind of support at all and you shouldn't even get it from white workers, because white workers are going to go down if they live in a white supremacist society. So I think you start to be really honest. One of the things that you learn is like the kind of current division around race and class is just like not the way it was in the CPUSA, as they're grappling with it at such a deep level, and it's gratifying to see.
And you also talk about the ways in which the party's experiences and debates about race and class and gender challenges the kind of fantasy or imagination of the comrade as white or as male. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So first, I just want to give. There's an example a labor organizer gives, and he's from the 30s, and he talks. So this is. To set the stage, to think of a group of people walking down a city street in the 1930s U.S. When that group's interracial, that's still relatively rare, right? It's still relatively controversial in a lot of areas. And the group has some black men and some white women in it. And somebody on a kind of street top on the side says, "Hey, comrades," to the people walking down the street. But he's not trying to attack them or anything. What he's acknowledging is like, oh, that's an interracial group. They must be communist. So there was something that was already recognized, that communists were those who were trying to live and practice equality. Like equality was supposed to be in their everyday life. So much so that even people who weren't in the party all understood that those who practice that kind of social equality must be communist. So that's kind of a wonderful and exciting part of that. I think other examples from the organizers, one party organizer goes to a branch and says, look, every one of you has to be willing to stand up for your, in their language, your Negro comrade in the event that someone makes a racial slur. Someone makes a racial slur, you stand up and slap that person. I mean, this is kind of shocking. Like, you stand up and slap that person. And if you have to, you shoot that person. And if you have to die for your black comrade, you do that. I mean, and he's completely serious, and they're going to be going to organize in the South. But it's like, if you're not willing to put everything on the table, then you shouldn't think then that you're fighting the struggle that has to be fought, right? You've got to be willing to go all the way. And he explains, he's like, black people in this country have been betrayed. They've been betrayed by white people every step of the way. And if we are going to overcome that, we have to be willing to die for that.
And so what do these experiences suggest about the role of the intellectual? I mean, so much of your work is excavating the kind of organic intellectuals of the working class that were in the party. So what does that teach us now?
Yeah, so like we were talking about these intellectuals in the party. Like one of my favorites, Harry Haywood, he wrote his memoirs. He called them Black Bolshevik, and he writes about his time studying in the Soviet Union in the School for Toilers of the East, and then back really working in CPUSA to bring about the kind of party line on the Black Belt thesis, which meant that the party was devoted to the struggle for Black self-determination, particularly in the Black Belt of the South. And so you've got this elaborate, very well thought through, detailed analysis of what it is for Black people in the US to understand themselves as an oppressed nation, and why that understanding as an oppressed nation, it leads to a better politics than understand it as racial oppression. Oh. And the reason is that by understanding the Black experience as that as that of an oppressed nation, it means that that struggle is objectively revolutionary. It's not secondary to another struggle. It's not added on to another struggle. It's not like the working class struggle is more important. It's like we've got sites that are objectively revolutionary that involve Black self-determination and that involve proletarian struggle. There's no ranking here. I mean, that, like, people have forgotten that, or maybe it's, it's like capital has repressed that memory. So now back to the intellectual part, I think that, like, when we recover that, we do political work, and that when we learn, when we read the histories, when we read the memoirs, when we find the video clips from interviews with folks, like we're recovering the knowledge that decades and decades and decades of capitalism and racism has wanted us to not see anymore.
And so part of your argument in excavating these memories, these submerged memories from the past and the present, is that it offers a more compelling vision of political belonging than allyship allows for. And I wonder if you could talk about the critique of allyship.
Yeah. So we see on, I'm teaching a college, and we see on college campuses and on social media this language of allyship all the time. And it's almost always raised in a way that's kind of like mean, designed to tell someone you need to go do X. And it works so as to kind of say, like, look, I'll do it like I'm a woman, right? So it's like, if you want to be my ally, Jordan, then you need to go educate yourself about what it is to be a woman. And don't ask me to tell you about it. You go find out on your own, because there's no way that, like, I'm not going to be bothered to tell you because I'm tired of dealing with it. Now, that's not a great way to build solidarity between us, right? If I wanted to say, if I get a little bit tired of you, let's say mansplaining or something, I might say I should patiently explain, okay, Jordan, I'm really glad you're in the struggle with me. And because both of us think that gender hierarchy is wrong, and both of us think that a better egalitarian world's not going to have that. Let's go read this discussion between Clara Zetkin and Lenin, which is super exciting. And you can see the long history of how communists have dealt with the woman question. And we can talk about that, and that would be really neat. So we've got the difference of an ally just seems like you're totally separate doing your thing, I'm separate doing my thing, and then maybe you'll come along. But if we're comrades, then we're going to be in the same struggle together, and we'll bring the things that we're going to learn, and we'll teach each other. And then you might say, oh, you'll have a chance to talk and to realize, and we actually build something. But I think, to my mind, it's like allies act like little sovereign states holding on to their own precious territory and maybe coming together out of self-interest, but they don't develop a common interest in a struggle for equality and liberation and justice.
But this isn't an argument against alliances, right? I mean, you're making an argument that alliances are in fact critical, so you would distinguish alliances from allies, right?
Yeah, so I would I would distinguish alliances from allyship. The weird thing, right, is like say when in social media stuff, when people are trashing one another about, like, if you're really going to be an ally, you need to do X. I mean, honestly, that's destroying the possibility of coalition work, right? That's destroying the possibility of being an alliance, because it's always just kind of, shaming the other person rather than creating the conditions of solidarity to even work together. So alliance is crucial. We have to be able to work together with people that we disagree with on some things. But that shouldn't be the kind of horizon of what it is to be a leftist in left struggle, right? We can have deeper political relationships than that. And that's what I think the figure of the comrade offers, is this sense of, we form a really tight bond, not because of your individual specificity or my unique whatever, but because of our commitment to fighting for something together.
So we live in a decisive moment, right? It's an existential crisis of global capitalism, the resurgence of neo-fascism, not just in the US, but Brazil, India, and also, new challenges with the crisis of U.S. imperialism. At the same time, we have this election where self-described democratic socialist Bernie Sanders is in the campaign. I wonder how the theory of comradeship can help those of us trying to think about this moment and where to intervene.
So this is at just a kind of very, very low level. I think what it should just do as the reflex is recognize that when any Democrat says unity, that doesn't mean they're comrades in any way, shape, or form. In fact, when any Democrat appeals to unity, what they mean 99% of the time is screw the working class. So that's not comradeship. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is that we should not focus our politics on the individual candidates, but on what are the movements that are pushing them and driving them. And the most exciting thing about the Sanders campaign is not Bernie Sanders. It's the large numbers of younger voters, now the mobilization of more people of color in this political process that has a good chance of redirecting the Democratic Party and maybe changing U.S. electoral politics. So I think, how the old Watergate saying was follow the money. I think we should say follow the movement, right? And where's the movement? The movement's around Bernie Sanders. And that's going to outlive him. That's going to that's going to be where we can push in the future. And I think, I think that's what we have to be excited about. And then that's the location also where we can find our comrades and then also, recognize our allies.
So when we think about comradeship as taking a political side, where do you see the kind of most decisive fronts of struggle right now? Climate
change is just... I actually don't think we can do anything without recognizing the general sort of the conjuncture as one defined by climate change. And one of the things that's interesting is that the politics around that are still really inchoate and have not formed in kind of clear sides, right? The stuff around climate denialism has sort of collapsed, right? That nobody, Trump, who cares, right? But nobody seriously is a climate denialist. The problems now are much more, is it going to be possible? Like capital wants to say, we can solve this. Well, that's obviously not true. And then the kind of social democrat wants to say, we can solve this with a sort of Keynesianism. I'm not optimistic on those lines. And particularly a Keynesianism that's really based on the continuation of U.S. imperialism. Right, I'm now thinking pretty much of Elizabeth Warren's plan. Oh, we sell, appropriate technologies to countries around the world. Well, that's imperialism. No, that's not a responsible collective approach to dealing with a global catastrophe. So I think that we're going to see in the next, probably next 5 years, a solidification of the lines. And I hope that we have a very strong, I'll say communist, some people might want to say revolutionary socialist, but line that that foregrounds the frontline communities, fence line communities, the way that imperialism has exacerbated the problem and making it worse for most people's lives in the world. And the U.S. Military is the largest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases on the planet. So you can't confront climate change without ending imperialism, right? So the anti-imperialist struggle today is also a struggle around the climate. So I think that's a major front line. I think in the U.S., the kind of dual front lines are immigration and policing. And they're two sides of the same thing, or two aspects of the same general problem of repressive state violence for the upholding of white and class supremacy. And in both of those instances, climate change is what we're also seeing is the state putting itself into place as the climate gets worse and as we have more migration, as we have people, more and more people, like say, becoming homeless, moving into new places because the climate's driving them, the police state's going to come down hard on them. So I think the fight against the police is a fight around climate, and I think the fight for open borders and responsible inclusion of people is also a fight around the climate. That's for starters. I think that's it.
So you make a compelling argument, I think, about comradeship, which is linked to what you describe as the communist horizon. I wonder if you could say a bit about the communist horizon.
My book, The Communist Horizon, came out in, I guess it was 2012. And when I was thinking about it, people always think of the horizon, it means that we never get there. And I'm like, yeah, that's one way to talk about a horizon, but a horizon is also the dividing line establishing where we are, right? It's how you orient yourself in space. Like, where's the horizon? Okay, I can see that. So I feel like even though people said, 1989, end of history, blah, 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 it's like, no. It's still the division between communism and capitalism that tells us where we are politically, right? As long as there's capitalism, there is something else. And that dividing line, that's something else is communism. And so I think, so if that's the dividing line, which side are you on, follows directly from that. So are you on the communist side? Are you a comrade or not? Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us for The New Intellectuals. It's been a pleasure to speak with Jodi Dean about her new book, Comrade, out from Verso. And you can find The New Intellectuals each month on our website, YouTube page, as well as Pluto Press's website, who'll be carrying the podcast. Stay tuned.